Hey, what's going on? Posido here. Today I'm going to show you 3 ways you can make your pentatonic scales sound fresh and hip in your solos. And if you want to go deeper, check out the link I'll put in the description below. I wrote a recent article about pentatonic scales and the chords they sound great on. Alright, let's go. The pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale, and you got players like John Coltrane, Brecker, McCoy Tyner, Chick Corea. They all use the pentatonic scale quite a bit in their solos. Now you can pretty much take any 5 notes to create a pentatonic scale, but there are some that are common. So for this video, I'm just going to focus on the minor pentatonic scale, which is probably one of the most popular pentatonic scales. I'm going to show you some ways that you can make this scale sound hip. Now, any of these techniques will sound great over any pentatonic scale. All right, so the first thing that we can do is think in shapes or chunks. And the easiest way to think about it is to kind of see this visually at first, and then you kind of get an idea. So I'm going to put up on the screen a visual representation of the fretboard, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. So what you're seeing right now are all the notes mapped out for a C minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so the numeric formula we have for a minor pentatonic scale is 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. Okay, so this is C minor pentatonic. It sounds like... Okay, you'll hear that a lot in bass fills. You'll hear that a lot in runs. But you know, as far as solos, if you were to just go up and down and thinking in almost a scalar fashion, it starts to become way too predictable. A lot of players like John Coltrane, McCoy Tyner, even Chick Corea, Brecker especially, they'll start to play this, break up the shapes a little bit, and kind of create these different permutations of these shapes to kind of create an angular, modern type of sound. Okay, so let's think of this in chunks of 4. Now you can really do chunks of 2, 3, 4, 5, however, but for the sake of ease, let's think of this in chunks of 4. Okay, so I'm going to take the first chunk of 4 notes in a C minor pentatonic scale. Okay, you could repeat notes if you want, but I'm just thinking the first chunk of notes. So C, E flat, F, G. Okay, I can create a melody out of that. Okay, and you can play around with that melody for a second when you're thinking in shapes. Okay, whatever melody you can come up with that chunk of 4 notes. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to then play melodies and phrases based on the next chunk of 4 notes. So that's E flat, F, B flat, or E flat, F, G, B flat. And you can, you know, I'm going to be sticking around first with this first technique. I'm going to be sticking to the diatonic notes of a C minor pentatonic scale. So here's my first set of notes, or chunk of notes that I'm going to play melodies off of. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to the next chunk of 4 notes. You can kind of hear that there's like built-in melody that almost happens with the intervals in a minor pentatonic scale or any pentatonic scale because there's spaced out notes. But that's the first step, is basically just take chunks of notes and you're just going to move up and down the scale using those chunks of notes, but sticking to the diatonic notes of the scale. And that kind of creates a cool sound. Now when you end a phrase, you can end it a little bit more deliberately by playing some sort of melodic line that's a little bit more catchy maybe, but sounds more intentional. And what that does is it really just kind of seals it, or just kind of puts a period to the sentence. So I can do something like this. Okay, and that sounds intentional, but you can hear as I'm moving chunks of shapes up the scale or down the scale, it kind of creates this sense of tension that's happening. It almost sounds like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever driven a manual car, but it sounds like you're shifting gears. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is to take now the same chunk or that same shape, but now what we're going to do is we're going to shift it up a half step or shift it down a half step. Now, here's the thing with any scale, when you go up a half step, or any chord, even when you play the same exact shape up a half step or down a half step, there are going to be no notes that are shared. And so this is going to create a great deal of tension. So this is a good way to kind of move shapes around, create that sense of tension and release. Kind of makes the ear or listener's head tilt a little bit, but it's kind of cool. So I can take the same shape, I can shift up a half step, and go back down. So that sounds cool. I'm going to go up an octave so you can hear it better. Okay, so that momentary sense of tension kind of creates kind of a hip sound. Now, what I recommend, is, play around with a melody and really get that melody in the ear and then shift it. I just find it sounds really good when you are focusing more on a melodic standpoint and even a rhythmic standpoint too, and then shift it just to break up the sense of monotony and just when it starts to become a little bit too predictable, that's a good time to throw that in too. And then again, end your phrase deliberately. Okay, so that's number 2. The second or the third one is I like to break up the octave. Now, Michael Brecker does this a lot. There's many ways you can break up the octave. And what I mean by that, or divide the octave, is another way you've probably heard. We have 12 notes in the scale, okay? Or 12 notes in Western music. So to get from C to C, I could play the same shape up in half steps, all the way up, and it kind of creates a sense of tension. And it's kind of cool. And when you finally get to back to the octave, it's released. So I can go. Okay. Now, that's 12 notes. So in the right context, that might sound good, but in a lot of other contexts, that might sound a little bit too predictable. But you can already hear, there's tension that you can create with that. You can also divide the octave in whole steps. You can divide it in minor thirds and major thirds and even perfect fourths. I like the major thirds. This is something Michael Brecker will use, or he divides it in major thirds, because you only need to move like 3 times and then you're already back at the octave again. Okay. So in the intro, for instance, I did something like this. I'm going to do this in C minor. It's something like this. And then I go up half. So that's that's a fresh sound when you're just moving a shape. And in this case, I was just doing a 2-note shape or 2-note chunk of just the major third. Resolves back to C minor. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to break down what I did in the introduction so you can get an idea how to piece together these techniques to get your pentatonic scale sounding fresh and hip. Okay, so in the introduction I played something like this. So this is my first chunk of 3 notes. I'm in the key of D flat minor. It's 4 notes, but it's really a chunk of 3 notes that I'm just playing around with. And then I'm going to kind of build on that melodic idea. And then I'm going to shift up a half step to create tension. Back down to resolve it. So it sounded like this. Okay, when you're shifting like that, I think it's called planing. That's another term for it. But you're not really thinking as far as like, oh, I'm now playing that D minor chord. You're just shifting. You're just thinking tension and then release. So. And then I think I did something like this. Okay, so what's going on there? I did. That's just the melodic phrase that I just came up with from using the minor pentatonic scale. Then I have a 4-note chunk that I'm going to play here. I'm just thinking these 4 notes, and I'm kind of playing them in a fourth-like manner. Then I shift down a half step to create tension again, and then I resolve on the third. But then instead of just stopping right there, I move up in major thirds. I divide the octave in major thirds. Back to the same shape again. Right now, that's just moving that same chunk of 4 notes in a different part of the minor pentatonic scale. But I'm sticking diatonic. Now I'm gonna shift down by a whole step instead of a half step, and then resolve. Okay, so it sounded like this. It's kind of a cool sound. And then I did something like this. I did something. Yeah, that's what I did. So this is another chunk of 4 notes. Now I'm going to divide the octave in minor thirds. So I'm going down in minor thirds. Same shape, just different order of the notes, but I'm still thinking now the same block shape here. Minor third. So just moving that shape. I'm going to take the same shape again. This is the same exact shape, but now I'm just sticking diatonically. Shift up a half step to create tension, go back down, and then just deliberately end my phrase as like a period in my sentence. So hope you have a lot of fun with that. I hope you can start using this and you find this really helpful. If you like this video, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot. All right, till next time, I'll see you later.